Good morning, everyone. I'm Rocco Landesman, Chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, and the 175th meeting of the National Council on the Arts is now in session. I would like to welcome everyone this morning, council members, NEA staff, colleagues here in person, and everyone watching online at arts.gov. For the record, the council members who are present are Museum Director Jim Ballinger from Phoenix, Arizona, musician, educator, and advocate Aaron Dworkin from Detroit, Michigan, arts consultant Joan Israelite from Kansas City, Missouri, arts patron Charlotte Kessler from Columbus, Ohio, musician, band leader, and composer Irvin Mayfield from New Orleans, Louisiana. Joining us by phone are council members Miguel Campaneria, Joanne Folletta, calling in from Ireland, bless her heart, and Brett Lott. I would like to note for the record that we regret that Ben Donnenberg, Lee Greenwood, Stephen Porter, Barbara Ernst Prey, and Frank Price could not participate in today's meeting. I also want to single out a special guest in the audience, Michael Orlov, the NEA's incoming Director of Presenting and Artistic Communities. There's Michael. We are thrilled that Michael is joining us. We're delighted to have him aboard. I think you're all going to find he's fantastic. I'm glad he could join us here today. Okay, back to business. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March council meeting?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Now we'll move on to the council members' votes and their application and guidelines review. I would like to invite our Deputy Chairman for Programs and Partnership, Patrice Walker-Powell, to take us through this section of the meeting. Patrice.
Good morning. We have moved this section from its usual placement at the end of today's agenda to the beginning, as council members Campaneria, Folletta, and Lott, as you heard, are unable to be here, but they have agreed to join us for the vote by teleconference. Thank you very much for your participation. The tally of the votes will be announced at the end of today's session. This morning, the council will be voting by ballot on grant recommendations totaling more than $80 million in 3 funding areas: artworks, state and regional partnerships, and leadership initiatives. These funding recommendations are found behind the corresponding tab in your council books. Please find your ballots in the folders at your place, and in order for your vote to be tallied, you must be present at the time of the motion, discussion, and vote. Council member affiliations have been recorded in the council books and on your ballots, and each member has been provided with an opportunity to update this information. Before voting, council members should review the list of recommendations and rejections and add to the list provided in your folders any affiliations that may be missing. Council members are recorded as not voting on applications with which they are affiliated. This list becomes part of the agency's official record. After brief summaries of the 3 funding areas, council members will have the opportunity to ask questions and/or discuss the recommendations before voting by ballot. After you've completed your ballot, staff will collect your folders and tally the votes. May I have a motion to consider the recommended grants and rejections under the artworks, partnership, and leadership tabs in your council book?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Now I will summarize the 3 funding areas on which you will be voting, pause for comments, and then ask you to mark your ballots for each category. The new artworks category combines and replaces 2 previously distinct funding opportunities: access to artistic excellence and learning in the arts for children and youth. Artworks is the agency's primary category for funding for the arts disciplines and encourages support in the following 4 outcomes: creation, the creation of art that meets the highest standards of excellence; engagement, public engagement with diverse and excellent art; learning, lifelong learning in the arts; and finally, livability, strengthening of communities through the arts. These recommended grants are the second group of applications in this category brought to the council for this fiscal year. The first half was considered in October of 2011. Using rounded figures, in August 2011, the agency received 1,624 eligible applications requesting more than $78 million in 2012 support. Recommended for the council's approval are 790 projects totaling up to $24,874,000. Grants are recommended for 48% of all applicants, with amounts ranging from $10,000 to $120,000. Recommended projects span 14 disciplines and fields and primarily focus on engagement, livability, and learning. Direct grants are recommended to 48 states and the District of Columbia. Are there any comments or questions from the council? If not, please mark your ballots. Next, state and regional partnership agreements. This category assists the nation's state arts agencies and regional arts organizations in their support for the arts. By law, 40% of the Arts Endowment's appropriated program funds are awarded in this manner. State arts agencies will utilize National Endowment for the Arts support in combination with state appropriated funding to support organizations, schools, and artists in producing more than 26,000 arts projects in 5,200 communities across the country. This year, a total of $39.4 million is being recommended for states and $7.9 million for regions and other relevant projects. Are there any comments or questions from the council? If not, please mark your ballot. Next, leadership initiatives. Leadership initiatives support a wide variety of projects of national and field-wide significance. At this meeting, the council is requested to approve funding for 127 projects for more than $8.2 million. Support is requested for the Design for Accessibility Initiative, the Arts Education Partnership, the NEA Education Leaders Institute, Poetry Out Loud, Arts and Media Grants Recommendations, Citizens Institute for Rural Design, formerly known as Your Town, the NEA's National Heritage Fellowships, CEC Arts Link Residencies, USA Artist International, The Big Read, NEA Poetry and Prose Pavilion, 4 NEA Jazz Masters Fellowships, 3 Knight NEA Community Arts Journalism Challenge grantees, Operation Homecoming, and 15 new research artworks projects. Are there any comments or questions from the council? If not, please mark your ballots. Finally, there are several projects under the Awards Update tab in your council book. These grants have been awarded under the chairman's delegated authority and are brought to the council's attention at this meeting, but no vote is necessary. Included are 149 Challenge America Fast Track grants and 30 20% amendments. Thank you, council meetings here present, as well as those checking in by teleconference. Next, on to guidelines, review, and voting. At this meeting, the council is asked to consider 3 sets of guidelines: partnership agreements for 2013, NEA National Heritage Fellowships for 2013, and finally, NEA Jazz Master Fellowships, also for 2013. I will now turn to Jillian Miller, our Director of Office of Guidelines and Panel Operations, to summarize the guidelines up for vote at this meeting. Jillian.
Thank you, Patrice. Good morning. As Patrice said, at this meeting you've got 3 sets of guidelines for your review, and they're all updates to existing categories. Your first set of guidelines is for partnership agreements, and that begins on page 3 of your Guidelines tab. These are our guidelines for the state arts agencies and regional arts organizations, and there is one change to highlight for you. Contingent upon approval of language that we've included in our FY13 budget request to Congress, the required match for a state partnership agreement grant must come from government funds that are controlled and appropriated by the state and managed by the state arts agency. Following those guidelines are the agency's 2 honorific fellowship categories, and they begin on page 20 of your Guidelines tab. First are the NEA National Heritage Fellowships, which honor master folk and traditional artists. And next are the NEA Jazz Masters Fellowships, which honor master jazz artists. And we did not make any changes to those guidelines.
Are there any comments or questions? If not, may I have a motion to approve the guidelines?
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Now back to our full agenda.
Thank you, Patrice, and thank you, Jillian. I would also like to thank Miguel, Joanne, and Brett for calling in for this meeting. Thank you very much. I have 2 updates to share regarding the membership of the National Council on the Arts. The First is that we received word last night that the Senate has confirmed the nomination of Deepa Gupta to the Council. Deepa is the Program Officer for Media, Culture, and Special Initiatives at the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation in Chicago. And she manages the Foundation's grant-making in arts and culture in Chicago, as well as the MacArthur Award for Creative and Effective Institutions. Deepa earned her MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern University and an MPA from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. She has an AB in Public Policy and Biology from the University of Chicago. We are glad the Senate has confirmed Deepa and look forward to her appointment by the President. Additionally, yesterday the President sent to the Senate his nomination of Maria Rosario Jackson to the National Council. Maria is a senior research associate in the Metropolitan Housing and Community Center at the Urban Institute, a public policy research organization based here in Washington, D.C. She is the founding director of the Culture, Creativity, and Communities program there, and her research expertise includes the role of arts in culture and communities. Maria currently serves on the boards of the Association of Performing Arts Presenters, the National Performance Network, the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, and on the advisory board for the Lambert Foundation. Previously, she worked on the boards of the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, the Fund for Folk Culture, and the Cultural Alliance of Greater Washington. Maria earned a BA and an MPA from the University of Southern California and a PhD from the University of California, Los Angeles. We look forward to her confirmation by the Senate. In addition to these hellos, I wanted to note also some goodbyes. Since the end of last year, a number of our colleagues on the NEA staff have retired. Each of them individually has contributed hugely to the agency, and collectively, they represent more than 382 years of service to the arts and the American public. It's a lot of years. The Council wanted to note the hard work and dedication of the following individuals: Michael Fabian, Innovation; Carlita Fields, Grants and Contracts; Ann Jarbo, Guidelines and Panel Operations; Georgia Jones, Budget; Ray Joyner, Multidisciplinary Arts; Silvio Lynn, Multidisciplinary Arts; Nona Milstead, Research and Analysis; Angelia Richardson, Civil Rights, EEO; Jeff Watson, Visual Arts Division; Laura Welsh, Arts and Media; Alice Wheelahan, Indemnity; Francesca Wilkins, Human Resources. I'd also like to mention, by the way, and recognize that in addition to Michael, we have another new director, Ira Silverberg in Literature. There's Ira. Ira's been at work here a while now, and he's already starting to make a big difference, and I'm very excited about the work he's going to do in our literature department. He's a dynamo. Okay. And I'm not sure if they are here, but we have two new colleagues in the finance office who are retiring: Loyal Newell and Lois Fields. Lois and Loyal, are you here? Somewhere? What? No, okay. And I would like now to turn to any of our council members if they'd like to add anything.
Mr. Chairman,
Jim Ballinger.
Yes, just wanted to note, I know it's a long list and a lot of years, but as director of an art museum, I would like to just make comment about Alice Wheelahan's service to our field.
Good.
At the very beginning of the indemnity program has made a huge, huge difference to the art museums in this country, and our ability for many, many years to bring things internationally, of which she became a true leader and expert in many complications around that, and more recently in the foundation of the Domestic Indemnity Program, which has taken off very, very quickly. And just would really like to note that among museum directors, and having served on their board and president, she was a much beloved resource to our field. And I think I just want to take this moment to acknowledge Alice Wheelahan for a career very well served on our staff.
Great, thanks, Jim. Normally, I would give an overview of my travels since the October meeting, but in this case, they've been rather extensive. So I wanted to encourage you to check out the NEA's Artworks blog at arts.gov, where you can get the full report on all my visits. Right now, I want to single out just a few highlights to give you a taste. Just before Thanksgiving, I went to Iowa, Wisconsin, and South Dakota. This included wonderful visits to the historic Millwork District in Dubuque. I see Deba right in front of me here. She knows what that's all about. In Dubuque, Iowa, and panel discussions on creative placemaking in Madison, Wisconsin, and Rapid City, South Dakota. It also included 2 stops I would like to single out. The first was at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation near Rapid City, South Dakota. This is a huge reservation, about the size of the state of Connecticut. The terrain is inhospitable. It is called the Badlands, I think, for a reason. And you have 80 to 85% unemployment on the reservation. But we visited what is an oasis of hope in the center of the reservation, the Heritage Center and the Red Cloud Indian School. You really have a sense as you tour around the reservation about the depth of the poverty. But the arts can be an important part of the regeneration of their economy, in addition to creating a strong connection to their history and culture. The other visit I want to mention from this trip was in Reedsburg, Wisconsin, where I was hosted by Donna Neuwirth and her partner Jay Salinas, who are the co-founders of Worm Farm, which has received an Our Town grant for their Farm Art Detour, which marries art, farms, and farm stands. We also had Stan Grzinski, who represented the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Wisconsin. Stan's the state director for rural development, and as it turns out, Stan Grzinski is an arts guy. He grew up as a sculptor and as an artist, and really values the arts. He's looking for ways that the arts can intersect with development in rural communities. We have a number of developments coming up with the Department of Agriculture and the White House's Rural Council, so you'll be hearing a lot more about putting the culture back into agriculture over the coming months. In February, I was off to Sacramento, Yolo County, and Los Angeles, California. The Yolo County Art and Ag Project is not dissimilar to Worm Farm in that artists work with local arts organizations, YOLO Arts in this case, to create works inspired by visits the artists make to farms. In Sacramento, we had an event at the Crocker Art Museum with Congresswoman Doris Matsui, who is a big supporter of the arts. In LA, I spent a lot of time with Craig Watson, the head of the California Arts Council, who I know going back to his days in Long Beach. Craig called last night to ask if I would hold up the Rocco California Arts license plate that I was given. But unfortunately, Debbie and I are moving apartments, and the license plate is safely packed away. But I love it. Maybe I'll bring it to the next meeting. In LA, I also addressed the College Art Association about our work with arts journalism. Stay tuned for an announcement next month about that. And visited Watts, a community that has received an NEA Our Town grant for their historic train station. This project is in partnership with the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, and they are creating an aesthetic walkway from the train station to the equally historic Watts Towers. If you've never seen the Watts Towers, you really should. They're the creation of a single artist over about 30 years who created by hand these amazing towers. The Watts Towers are definitely one man's vision, one man's idiosyncratic, oddball aesthetic, and they have become an iconic part of the landscape of Los Angeles. Congresswoman Laura Richardson was with us, a really gracious woman who is very committed to the arts there. After LA, I was off to Phoenix, and I wonder if I can call on Jim once more, Jim Ballinger, who hosted me there, to report on that part of the trip. Jim?
Glad to. The day in Phoenix, part of this Arizona trip with the chairman, started off with a meeting of about 20 colleagues, directors of cultural organizations throughout the metropolitan Phoenix area. I'd say the first half was jovial, congenial. The second half got a little bitier, particularly, and very candid and very good. I think it's important for staff here to realize the chairman's visit means two things. It means, I'll say, the marketing of the NEA and programs, et cetera, but it also is a moment where colleagues come together and feel free to voice some of the angst that are in the communities around the country. I assume you see this all the time. In our case, there was a pretty spirited discussion around the idea of supply and demand of particularly performing arts facilities, which is ironic in Phoenix because the Maricopa Partnership for the Arts, which was a movement a number of years ago to start a dedicated funding stream for the arts, was begun for specifically that reason, that the business leaders of Phoenix felt that we may have overbuilt the performance environment as all the different towns around the city had built brand new performing arts centers. So it is a very real issue. Not sure anybody has the answer, but it was a very good dialogue. We then went to Chandler, Arizona, which is part of the metropolitan area, looked at their new city hall, which embraces kind of the art place investment that the NEA is making with this new building, a lot of public art, and a new art gallery for community artists to come together there. We visited a Latino cooperative gallery called Chico there as well. Went to the new Musical Instrument Museum. I'll put an ad in here. If anybody is in Phoenix, it's a must-see, after the Phoenix Art Museum, of course. But the Musical Instrument Museum is a new museum in the last couple of years that is a little bit of a misnomer. It's more than a collection of instruments, which it is, from 130, 140 countries across the globe. But it really is more of a museum of music and performance and how these instruments work. And then we visited the Phoenix Art Museum in the ideal manner. It was a day we were closed, so just the two of us got to enjoy the museum. And then we went down and met Phoenix's new mayor, Greg Stanton, who I think it's fair to say is going to be a real art mayor. He's already agreed to come to NEA Institute and just recommended to council to triple the arts budget in Phoenix day before yesterday. Then we visited the public market where there is a NEA public space grant there and looked around some of the kind of emerging gallery scene and all, tried to give the chairman a sense of the vitality of downtown Phoenix. Then we sent him on his way down to our neighboring a place called the Old Pueblo, Tucson. So it's great to have you there, Rocco. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, also known as Tucson, which I highly recommend to any of you who have not been there. It's a wonderful town. That visit was hosted by Roberto Bedoya, head of the Tucson Pima Arts Council, where I got to see the Tucson Art Warehouse District, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Tucson Museum of Art, where they hosted a reception for Film Forward. Film Forward is run by Sundance Institute with a partnership among the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities, the NEA, NEH, and IMLS. I was able to meet the directors of 3 of the participating films: Mike Mills, who directed Beginners; Ali Samadi Ahmadi, who directed The Green Wave; and Andrew Opeaha McLean, who directed On the Ice. It's the best I've done with those names so far. On the Ice was especially powerful for me because it was set in Barrow, Alaska, where I had been in August as part of the Rasmussen Foundation trip. I also visited Ajo, Arizona, which is near the Mexican border and used to be the home of one of the big copper mines. We met with the International Sonoran Desert Alliance, which is our town grantee for a project focusing on adaptive reuse of buildings and outdoor spaces. Finally, my most recent trip was to Arkansas and Kansas. Our first stop was in Bentonville, Arkansas, where we toured the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. They have a tremendous collection. But even more than the collection, it's the setting of the museum and the spirit of the people who are there. The museum is set over a series of lagoons, which are sourced by a crystal spring, hence the name. The surrounding woodlands have several hiking trails. The exterior of the museum is arresting, and it's just a compelling place that relates to the community. They draw people from all over, many of them first-time museum goers. I highly recommend it. After Bentonville, we went on to Fayetteville, where we visited with the Northwest Arkansas Community Creative Center to learn about its Clay for Cancer project. They take adult cancer patients and engage them to use clay to create works of art. It was extraordinary to witness, and it made our work exploring the intersections among art and human development with HHS all the more urgent to me. We went on to North Little Rock and Little Rock, Arkansas, where we met with the mayor of North Little Rock, Patrick Hayes, at the Argenta Arts Foundation. We also met with the mayor of Little Rock itself, Mark Stodola, and went to a panel about creative placemaking at the Arkansas Repertory Theater. This panel included Warwick Sabin, who's the publisher of the Oxford American, which is now based in Little Rock. He's done great work with that publication. I remembered, I told him that I once visited with Jerry Lee Lewis in Mississippi, and that even with all those trophies that he had on the wall, the one thing he wanted to show me more than anything else was an article about him in the Oxford American. Ginger Beebe, wife of the Arkansas Governor Mike Beebe, made the opening remarks for the panel. I was then on to Kansas, where we were hosted by Mary Kennedy McCabe, director of the Mid-America Arts Alliance, one of our great regional partners. I've wanted to visit Kansas, of course, but there were also two things I wanted to make absolutely clear during my visit. One, regardless of the status of the state arts agency, individual organizations in Kansas are absolutely able to apply to us. A lot did apply at our March deadline, and I hope even more will do so at the August deadline. And two, we have every hope and expectation that the Kansas State Art Agency will submit an application to us this fall for fiscal year 13 funding. While I was in Kansas, I got to visit the North Topeka Arts District and had a panel discussion about creative placemaking that included Marie Pico, who's a great friend of the NEA from the Big Read, and the Public Services Director of the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library. We then went on to Lawrence, and here my heartbreak was that we were only an hour away from Joan Israelite's beloved Kaufman Center. There's Joan. I was not able to make it over for a repeat visit to see the center completed, but I've given her a rain check on that, and we'll be back. We were able to see the Lawrence Art Center, the Percolator Community Art Association, and the Spencer Museum of Art. The director of the Spencer is Sarah Lynn Reese-Hardy, who used to be here at the NEA in charge of museum grants. I've been thinking a lot about the point of all this travel that I've really been lucky enough to be able to do in this job. It is important to be on the ground to see the local challenges, opportunities, and innovations happening. It is also vital to be visible and let people know that the NEA exists and that it exists for them. But I also realize that over the past 3 years, we have, I think, sparked a national conversation around the topic of creative placemaking. At its most simple, creative placemaking is simply how communities use the arts to shape their social, physical, and economic characters. But more broadly, it is about making the walls of arts institutions permeable so that the community is let in and the art is let out. I think we can always do more to help weave arts organizations and their communities even more tightly together, and others seem to find real resonance in this notion as well. Jason Schupak, our design director, recently mentioned to me that there are 5 conferences coming up around the topic of creative placemaking in Baltimore, Colorado, Hartford, Connecticut, Lowell, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. The NEA had nothing to do with organizing any of these. Each was initiated by their own community. And I'm really heartened that arts organizations find this a useful organizing principle for working with their mayors, supporters, and communities. It seems to be taking on some of the characteristics of a real national movement, and I'm very heartened to see it. As you all know, thanks to the leadership of Joan Shigakawa, the NEA has instituted Blue Star Museums, a partnership among the NEA, the Department of Defense, Blue Star families, and over 1,500 American museums to offer active duty military families free admission from Memorial Day to Labor Day. This is an important and extraordinary program in and of itself, but it has also served to create an even closer connection between the NEA and the military community. Today, we would like to highlight another important aspect of our work with the military. I would like to call up Bill O'Brien, our Senior Advisor for Program Innovation, who has been the primary driver of this work. Bill will introduce the next section of this morning's presentations. Bill, take it away.
Thank you, Chairman. In 2004, with support from the Boeing Corporation, our previous chairman, Dana Gioia, and the NEA launched a program called Operation Homecoming. This created a platform for troops and their families to write about their wartime experiences. The program generated extraordinary examples of what our current chairman refers to in his first definition of artworks. Basically, artworks is a noun, objects, works of art. In this case, created by artists who also happen to be military family members, whose writings were anthologized in a book that was named Book of the Year by the Washington Post, and were also the subject of 2 films that were nominated for Emmy and Academy Awards. In January of this year, as a result of a historic partnership with the Department of Defense, we're investigating the inner workings of Rocco's second definition of artworks. Basically, artworks as a verb. In other words, the idea that art works on and within people, to change, to inspire, perhaps even to heal. Again, with support from the Boeing Corporation and through administrative support from the Writers Center, the NEA is partnering with the National Intrepid Center of Excellence at the new Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda to investigate the impact that arts interventions may have on the psychological and cognitive health of service members who have sustained signature wounds from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. We're currently conducting investigations via expressive and creative writing sessions conducted both in clinical and non-clinical settings. And we're pleased to have 2 of our key partners on those efforts with us here today, Melissa Walker and our writing instructor, Ron Capps. First, I'd like to invite up Melissa. Melissa is the arts therapist and healing arts program coordinator at the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, although her bosses tend to refer to her as NICoE's secret weapon. Melissa?
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to share the work we've been doing, and thank you, Bill, for the introduction. The National Intrepid Center of Excellence is a facility on the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center base. It's a lot to say. And it is a facility that was built for the treatment, the research, and the education of traumatic brain injury and psychological health and our active duty service members. This is just to give you an idea of 3 of our key, the things we want to address when we're working with them. So we have the clinical model, a research model, and a training and education model. This is very important. This is to show you how integrative the treatment is at the NICoE. We work in treatment teams together, and there's 4 weeks of intensive outpatient care, and we communicate across all disciplines, and it's really quite amazing, the holistic care and the work that we're doing with each other. So I actually get to sit in with these providers and share the artwork and talk about the symbolism behind it. The other great thing is that at the NICoE, a service member will have more encounters with providers in 4 weeks than they would in years in the conventional outpatient setting. I work with the service members as an art therapist individually and in group sessions, and I just wanted to show you some of the things and the goals that we reach with them. It's pretty amazing. Everyone says to me, how do you do this with service members? They're these tough men that are coming in and they want to do art, and how do you get them to do that? And so it's just about making them feel comfortable, creating a safe space, and letting them know it's okay, that it can be a manly thing, and that they have these stories to share, and they're rich, and they are beautiful, and they deserve to open up and talk about them. So the group treatment goals, I want to really specifically hone in on those, because those are the same goals that we have when we work with the service members and the group creative writing sessions, and we have seen these being met through the past couple of months, which is very exciting. That is actually a brain that was drawn by a service member, free-handed, in a session, so they're very, very talented. Just to give you an idea of some of the other projects that we have going on, we want to also address the family members that come to the NICoE with their loved ones. So I've been doing some spouse art therapy sessions. When I can, I bring in the family with the service members in the individual sessions, and they'll create a project together, and it's great. A lot of them have come back and said, now we have art time at home. And it's nice because when you're dealing with something like post-traumatic stress, you have the isolation problem, and some service members feel like they can't really interact with their families. So art is another beautiful way to help that happen again, to reconnect. Of course, we're here to talk about the Expressive and Creative Writing Program. So we'll talk a little more on that in a moment. We're also looking to expand our music part of the program. We just want this to be robust, well-rounded, and rich, as I said earlier. This was also a picture created by a service member, and it was meant to represent him coming up out of the ashes, the phoenix rising. Below that is a little glimpse of some writing by a service member. It's a haiku that he wrote as he left the NICoE. So, bitter no more, dream of hope, freedom at last, change is forever. One of the most successful projects I've implemented with these service members is the mask making, and they do this the first week that they come to work with me in a group session. And this has to do with identity. Through my work with them, I realized when you've been injured, you really are trying to figure out who you're going to become as you move forward and as you start to heal. And they have to, they're adapting, they're changing, and so identity is a big piece. And the masks, although I share with them that they are to think about that, the identity piece, there are a lot of different themes that come out of the mask making, so I wanted to show you a couple of them. So we have the obvious patriotism. Many of them get into their work because they love the nation. We have the injury itself and the pain that they want to express that they're dealing with. And then you have, of course, the death and the grief that they've been exposed to. There's a split sense of self. Many of them say they feel like they're one person when they're deployed and they're another person when they're at home, and those two sides compete, and that's often what makes it very difficult for them to reintegrate back into the community, because parts of who they are when they're there will spill into who they are when they're home, and it makes it very difficult for them. So they're trying to kind of process this too and figure out how to deal with these different parts of their identity. The compartmentalization, fragmentation, that has a lot to do with the post-traumatic stress and trauma and the fragmentation of traumatic memories. It's difficult to remember a moment like that as a whole, so this tends to happen. It tends to happen too with just how they are in their lives. They want to place everything in separate compartments. And I love to show the spouse art because you would think that they were all sitting next to each other when they created this. They weren't. They were all in different groups, and this is just to show you how similar they are. And it has a lot to do, I think, with the caregiver, the nurturing, often female side to them. During the third week, they create montage paintings in a group, and these have been very interesting. I describe to them as they go into this, I give them a directive to think about how to process their 3 weeks thus far at the NICoE program and how they feel about it. But what's great is that the montage paintings, it's all about collaging and layering, and they come to us with layers and layers of complications, layers of things going on that they're trying to figure out. So this is a beautiful symbolic way to kind of metaphorically layer those things, have it all in one place, and have them be able to look at it and start to explain what they're going through. And these have also been nice because it gives them a chance to think forward. So the mass often, it's about kind of in that moment of time or a memory. This gives them the ability to think about past, present, and then hope for the future, which is very important. Wanted to quickly show you some integration between, one thing we're interested in is how these different modalities interact with each other. So, for instance, I had a service member say the other day that he felt like the writing opened up his ability to create art. So these are doorways to each other. And so this service member didn't know if he could paint, wasn't really sure if he wanted to, but he loved to play the piano. So I said, what would happen if you sat down with a canvas and we played piano in the background? And he sat down and we played piano, and next thing you know, he's painting. And when he was done, he loved it. And he said, this is the color coming out of the darkness. And for him, that was symbolic because he came to us numbed and over-medicated, and he had just started coming off of the medication and felt like he was coming alive. So it was beautiful. This next slide is going to be a video of Chief Warrant Officer Garrett, who was, we were very lucky. I loved working with him, and we were lucky that he would give us a glimpse of some of his treatment and what helped. So he's going to talk about the mask making. The footage is kind of raw, so the first question she asks is, what's something that really stood out to you during your treatment?
Did any stand out to you or any of your favorite?
Art, by far.
What did you do in art therapy?
Made a mask.
And how did that affect your treatment?
It was able, it allowed me to put 23 years of PTSD and TBI stuff together in one place that it's never happened before. Sorry. No one was able to figure it out because the way conventional medicine works in the Navy, the Army, you see this guy, you go see this guy, you go see this guy. They never talk. This is where this is awesome, because you come here, they talk every day. So this person talks, this person talks. They have notes. So they send me to art therapy, and I go in there and I give them a mask, and you sort of just zone out into the mask. You zone out into the drawing. And for me, it just released the block. So I was able to do it. And then when I looked at it after 2 days, I was like, holy crap, here's the picture, here's the key, here's the puzzle. And then from there, it just soared. I mean, from there, my treatment just went, out of sight, because they were like, Kurt, explain this, explain this. And for the first time in 23 years, I could actually talk about stuff openly to like anybody. I could talk to you about it right now if I wanted to, because it unlocked it. It's just amazing.
Makes me emotional. He's amazing. So that concludes my portion. I would love to introduce Ron Capps, our writing instructor. It's been such a pleasure working with him. He's doing amazing work, and I'm so fortunate to have the NEA and Operation Homecoming be a part of the NICoE Healing Arts program. So, Ron.
Thank you, Melissa. If you'll indulge me for just a moment, I'd like to read to you a paragraph from an essay I wrote a couple of years ago. When the phone rang, I jumped, a little, startled, and nearly shot myself. This would have been somewhat ironic because I was holding the pistol in my hand, planning to kill myself, but I would have pulled the trigger while it was pointed at my foot rather than my head. The ringing phone broke the spell. After all the crying and shaking, the moralizing and justifying, the calming of hands and nerves, the intense focus on the immediate act of charging the weapon, putting a bullet in the firing chamber, taking off the safety, preparing to put the barrel into my mouth. The ringing phone pulled me back from the brink. That event, sitting alone in the desert, scared and crying, ready to end my life with a bullet to the brain, took place in 2005. I was a soldier. I had served in 5 wars, in Kosovo, Rwanda, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Darfur. My 20-year marriage was ending badly. My mom had died a few weeks before, and I was in the throes of a relapse of post-traumatic stress disorder. Obviously, I came home from that day, but the story of how I got home is what's important. I wrote my way home. When medication and talk therapy didn't seem to work for me, writing did. Being able to write about my experiences helped me get control of those memories. And at the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, through Operation Homecoming, I'm part of a team that's giving other service members a chance to do the same thing. We're giving them the skills and the confidence they need to use writing as a filter for their traumatic memories, to allow them to process those memories in a more controlled manner. And I can tell you from personal experience that either you control the memory or the memory controls you. Our approach is to tie the writing to work they've already accomplished, the work that Melissa does, the art therapy. And she has the service members creating masks, and I think masks are very interesting because they can both obscure and reveal things about the creator. So I tie writing to this by introducing a piece of literature that also involves masks. It's a scene from the Iliad where, between Hector, the great Trojan warrior, and his wife Andromache, and their small son. Briefly, what happens is that Hector reaches for his son, but the helmet he's wearing that obscures most of his face the way a mask would scares the child, so the child doesn't recognize Hector, his father, until Hector removes the mask. This scene helps us to develop themes of identity, of family, of loyalty, of personal integrity. All of these are themes that have resonance with service members. After we've read the scene and discussed it, we have the service members write for 15 minutes. We ask them to write about something of consequence, something they've had on their minds for some time. We explain that they're only writing for themselves, that no one needs to see what they've written. So we urge them to be quite honest with themselves and honest in their work. When they're done writing, they have a number of options. They can destroy what they've written. Some find this cathartic. They can save it to revise or expand later. They can share it with the group, or they can share it with a therapist at NICoE. Among the service members I've had the honor to work with at NICoE, many have come in as skeptics. A number have left as committed writers. But whether or not they're convinced that this work will help them, they've all been willing to give it a try because they want to get better. They want to stay on active duty in service of their country. The writing that has come out of these sessions has run the gamut from intensely personal stories of combat experience to wild flights of fancy and nearly everything in between. We've seen service members explore some universal themes like loyalty and the strength of family, and some have chosen to write fiction, others nonfiction. We've had some exceptionally powerful poetry in the recent weeks, a bit of which we're going to share with you in just a moment. I think it's important to add here that this is only part of the month-long treatment that the service members receive at NICoE. No single part of their care is going to solve all the problems they have, but we're making an important contribution to their recovery. The service members and the family members tell us so, and I'm sure the research will bear this out. And now, I'd like to share with you a poem that we recorded just the night before last at NICoE. The author is Corporal Anthony Dash, a United States Marine. Tony was badly wounded in Afghanistan and came through the NICoE program last month. He's now on the mend at the Wounded Warrior Regiment Detachment at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center.
I titled this called Seeing Isn't Believing. So I daydream, what if I were an amputee? And this is what I see. The teacher asked, who threw that? It wasn't me. Not having to worry about the dryer ate my other sock. Damn! Where's my other sock? You're too tall for this ride. Well, for a couple of minutes, I'll kiss these legs goodbye. So I talked with my buddy, which by the way, is an amputee. And he says, yeah, when I go home, people open and hold the door. Even the most rudest people. Everybody asks, can I carry your bags? But for me, it's, what's wrong with you? Ain't nothing wrong with your legs or your back. You got hands, so pick that up and carry that. The door's swinging shut, too fast for me to get there on time. You can open that. I talk with my buddy and he says, you really don't wish you was me. I wake up every day. When I look in the mirror, I notice what's missing on me. I say, well, when I look in the mirror, I notice it's not me. I can't even see me. He says, what do you mean? I say, take a look. What do you see? He says, all of you. And I say, yes, yes you do. But I don't see nothing.
When Tony Dash read that or spoke that the other night, it's actually funny. He doesn't read his poems. He says he's going to sing one. It occurred to us that another name for that poem could have been The Invisible Wound. The signature wounds of this war often can't be seen, but they can be felt. And I think he did a great job of showing all of us what that feels like. In 2000, neuropsychiatrist Eric Kandel won a Nobel Prize for discovering that memory is not static. It changes in the act of remembering at the molecular level. Since then, him and others have been continuing to investigate how what we think about, what we dream about, what we wonder about in the act of remembering continues to change our brain on a daily basis. It's intriguing to think about what the transformative effects of art is when you think of it in those terms. And I think Tony Dash and others are feeling that now. If we reach a point where we know all there is to know about everything, there will be no such thing as something being more art than science. And it's exciting to know that we're getting closer. I'm going to love the day when science learns what Ron Capps already knows. And in closing, I just want to say that every Wednesday, Melissa and Ron and I introduce ourselves to a new incoming group of cohorts. When I do, I am sure to tell them that on behalf of the endowment, we're very grateful for their service, and we're honored to be in the room with them. And I'd like to extend that same thing today to Ron and Melissa. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes. I'm very moved by both your presentations, as I'm sure everyone is here. I'm wondering, I noticed that with the mass creation in particular and other works of art, that it probably is hung, at the center itself. But are you doing any kind of traveling exhibits of the work? And I'll let you answer that before I finish the rest of the thought.
I've been dreaming of them. I'm hoping that will happen eventually.
Well, you may be familiar with Exhibits USA, that is managed by the Mid-America Arts Alliance. And Rocco already mentioned Mary Kennedy McCabe earlier in his remarks, but it seemed to me that what a powerful exhibit, perhaps combined, with poetry, some of the writings, with the actual exhibit, but not only what it would do for the rest of the country to help understand what people are going through, but what it would do for the creators,
the validation,
the validation of that work. So it would be wonderful to see something like that come about.
Thank you so much. I will note that name and look it up.
I'd be happier. I'm sure anyone at the NEA would be happy to make the introduction and even talk a little bit about what this all entails.
Thank you. And I completely agree. We actually do. I wish I had a picture of it. There's a gallery of a sense of the art room, and it's interesting because in the beginning, before that existed, a lot of service members would take the work with them, which I encourage. It's very symbolic. It's important that they have it. Once we started hanging them, I've heard multiple service members say, I want to leave it because I'm hoping it will inspire and open up the next service member to come through. And so it's been beautiful because, like I said, if you have someone come in that's a little skeptical, it's hard to be skeptical because you're surrounded by your buddy's work, your peers' work, and they say all the time. I mean, a service member said yesterday, I've definitely been some of these places that these guys have been before me. He's like, I can tell. I can just tell by looking at them what their job was, or their MOS, or what parts of the valley they were in. And I said, I mean, it's pretty amazing. So I completely agree with you. I think they deserve that. They deserve to be able, like I said earlier, to tell their stories and be exhibited. So thank you for the recommendation, and I'll take it very seriously.
I'd like to just, on behalf of the council, and echo the chairman's sentiments that I'm truly honored about the work that you guys are doing. It's really amazing. And maybe my new slogan is going to be, art knows more than science.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Ron. I think their work speaks for itself. What we just saw. Melissa and Ron are incredibly dedicated. We're so lucky to have them. They're huge assets for our agency. Melissa is an incredibly dedicated therapist, but Ron is a writer, a professional writer, and a respected one. And I think that makes a huge difference to this program as these soldiers encounter their work, that they're being taken through it by someone who is credible himself as a writer. And so it's no surprise, I think, that we're seeing a lot of literary value. There's a completely unexpected aspect to this, which is the literary value of what comes out, which is something that we at the NEA, of course, would notice. So I think there are many aspects to this work that are incredibly valuable, and we thank you both for what you do every day. You do the work, and we're very grateful to you. From my perspective personally, none of this would have happened here at the NEA were it not for Joan Shigagawa and Bill O'Brien, who have created this project, spearheaded it. It's a continuation of the Operation Homecoming initiative that was started by my predecessor, Dana Gioia. It's a tremendous program, and as a result of Joan and Bill, and now Melissa and Ron and your whole team at NICoE, it's becoming ensconced as part of the systematic therapy at NICoE, and we're very proud of all of you. Thank you. Next up, I feel like there shouldn't be a next up. That was very difficult to follow. I'd like to turn to the topic of arts education. And before I ask Sunil to come up and introduce our next speaker, I would like to acknowledge our extraordinary arts education staff at the agency, and especially recognize the interim leadership of Daniel Beatty, who has been acting director. Working with our research office, they led a really powerful day-long seminar on arts learning standards and assessment, which has inspired a number of important discussions at the agency and really shaped our search for the new director of arts education. I expect we'll be making the announcement of the new director in the next few weeks. In the meantime, if you want to see the presentations, they are available on arts.gov under the webcast tab. Okay, I'd now like to turn things over to Sunil Iyengar, our Director of Research and Analysis, who will introduce our next speaker. Sunil?
Thank you, Rocco. It's an extreme privilege, really, to follow both Ron and Melissa. About a year ago, in this very room, Rocco joined the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathy Sebelius, to kick off a forum showcasing research and programs involving the arts and human development. That event has since led to the creation of an interagency task force on the arts and human development, whose mission is to catalyze opportunities for new research and information sharing about the arts' role in promoting health, cognitive, social, and behavioral outcomes. One of the studies shown that day formed the basis of the report that we just released today called The Arts and Achievement in At-Risk Youth, Findings from Four Longitudinal Studies. That's available at our website today, arts.gov, and I believe there are copies out there now for people to pick up. That foundational research on that day was presented by James Catterall, Emeritus Professor of Education at UCLA, and currently Director of the Centers for Research on Creativity, based at the California Institute of the Arts and the UK's University of the Arts in London. As a trained educational policy analyst whose work has included extensive research into the economics and labor force of U.S. education, as well as, more recently, creativity and cognition, James has already endeared himself to many in the arts education community for his service with the Arts Education Partnership, where he contributed to a seminal publication, a kind of compilation of existing research called Critical Links, Learning in the Arts and Student, Academic, and Social Development. But what I think fetched our attention here was really a couple of years ago, in 2009, James released a little book called Doing Well and Doing Good by Doing Art. And that book made an impact on me personally insofar as I realized that what he had done is he had looked at the Department of Education's National Education Longitudinal Study, which tracks kids from childhood starting in 1988 all the way up to 2000, when many of these people were young adults, and looked at how they developed over the years in terms of academic and social achievement, and it also tracked their levels of arts engagement, and respectively what's the relationship we see in these developing over time in this population, and that's the longitudinal aspect. So we kind of cajoled James to try that analysis and really help us look, are there other databases in the federal government that we could use to do a similar analysis? Surely there must be other places where we're looking at children over time, and we also may be tracking their levels of arts exposure and what else they're doing in life. And happy to say James signed on for that, and the result is this report that he's going to talk about today. I think one of the things he's focusing on is particularly, it's in our title, At Risk. In that context, we're referring to low socioeconomic status, because as you'll see, some of the findings are particularly noteworthy for that segment of the cohort, those youth who have come from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds. So with that, James, thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. Mr. Chairman, members of the council, visitors, it's a pleasure to be here, but it's a difficult assignment. I'm an avid adherent to the professor's notion that why say anything in 10 minutes if you can say it in 60 minutes? And in a sense, that maxim applies to the whole assignment, because I analyzed one database and presented the results in 200 pages, and Sunil asked me to analyze 4 databases and keep it to 15 pages, which is essentially what we've done for you today. The report looks like this. I pinched a couple pieces of it for this first slide. So I was here a year ago presenting essentially the book, and it grew into this project, and I recruited a couple of academics to work with me who had significant experience with the other databases, licenses to use them, and we were off and running. Sunil wanted the report in 8 weeks, and we got it to him in 8 months, right? I think that's the way it worked. So here we are. Just reality. Susan Dumais from LSU, Gillian Hampton-Thompson from the University of York in England joined me in doing this, a sociologist and director of education research in York at that university. This describes the essence of the 4 databases we used. The one I used initially was called the National Educational Longitudinal Survey of 1988. Followed kids, initially 25,000 of them, from age 14 to 26. The National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, which was done by the Labor Department, taking a group of middle and early high school kids, ages 12 to 16, to ages 23 to 27. But you can see it's a later block in time, and one of the things we wanted to capitalize on by using multiple surveys was, let's see what happens in a sort of different era, a different decade for kids this age. And then the Educational Longitudinal Survey of 2002 was short, and it's still running, following kids from 10th grade to the second year of college or in the labor market at that time in their lives. And the Early Childhood Longitudinal Survey started with kindergartners, age 5, and reports on their progress through age 13. So you can see we get varied perspectives by using all the databases on ideas of academic, psychological, and social development. And just a footnote, in watching Melissa and Ron, what they showed you, in a sense, is a very powerful, vivid microcosm of some of the issues we address in this report, which is what are potential and actual psychological, developmental, achievement-related outcomes from being involved in art. And I couldn't imagine a more poignant picture of just that than we saw. I'm going to try to pinch that video, if you don't mind, for something I do in the future. That was just fantastic. To do this work, I don't want to belabor the frame, but if family income or socioeconomic status is arrayed on the left axis, the vertical axis, and the amount of arts engagement kids had is arrayed on the horizontal axis, we took the extremes and focus in this work on the low-income kids. So it's the bottom SES quartile, and it's the lowest kids in arts engagement. We scaled things like taking lessons, being in the band, in the dance club, the theater troupe, virtually anything we could get our hands on in the survey, about 25 indicators. And we compare the lowest scores on that indicator and the highest ones. We're looking at kids really heavily involved in the art versus not. And that's how we frame the study. So it's these high arts kids, we call them, versus low arts kids. We're focusing on low income, and we're looking at academic success, attainment in school. Right now, I'm going to look at, first, educational attainment issues. I'll go into the psychological motivation indicators in a minute. And these are kind of selected peaks. If you leaf through the report, there are at least twice as many graphics as I'm going to show you here, so I've selected ones that sort of tell the story, and I'm going chronologically. These are views of the younger kids, and this is the, how these kids did by the time they got to high school. So some of these studies started in 8th grade. We knew the kinds of arts they were involved in middle school and early high school. And what do we know about how they did by the time they finished high school? Well, the high arts kids considerably outperformed the low arts kids. On this measure, their GPA, the GPA of the two groups that we, grade point average of the two groups that we compared. On the left column, the low arts, low SES group, their mean GPA was 2.5, which is a C plus, or almost a C plus, it's right in the middle. And the high arts, low SES kids, a pretty solid B GPA. And the third column, incidentally, is the overall sample average for all the low-income kids. And it's interesting to see that the high arts, low SES kids outperform the whole sample of poor kids. And we see that in several instances, which is very interesting to see. It's hard to find education studies where low SES kids do better than the average kid, because they typically have lower performance indicators, academic indicators, and so on. Okay, another. Dropping out of school, big issue. We had good data and pretty graphic presentation on this one. So this is a percent of 13 to 17-year-olds who dropped out, who did not graduate from high school. The low arts, low SES group in the left column was 22% of that group. So low-income group, typically known to drop out more often. Anyway, but if you're not involved in any art, that statistic was 22%. Our high arts, low SES group, only 4% dropped out. something pretty startling is happening here. And part of it's undoubtedly some of the academic engagement pieces that we've put together in this puzzle. Another is that kids who are heavily involved in arts tend to be heavily involved in the school culture one way or another, and sort of engaged in what's going on, and in a vernacular, they're getting with a program that's part of accepted and valued school culture. So it shows up right here. Okay, so what happens when they move on to college? Well, this is a percent of 10th graders who went on to enroll in a bachelor's degree program. And in our low arts group, 19% of poor low arts kids went on to enroll in a bachelor's program. 32% of the high arts kids went on to enroll in a bachelor's program. The whole sample average is quite a bit higher. It's 46%. Percent of 8th graders that went on to earn mostly A's in college. So we looked at the grades reported for students in our samples. 9% of the low arts poor kids earned mostly A's when they got in during college, and 15% of the high arts low SES kids earned mostly A's. So it's a 67% difference. And then earning degrees eventually. What percent by the time they're 23 to 27 actually earned bachelor's degrees? It's one thing to enroll in a bachelor's program or to aspire to it. It's another thing to earn the degree itself. Well, our low arts, low SES group, 5% ultimately earned bachelor's degrees. 17% of our arts-engaged low-income kids eventually earned bachelor's degrees. It's a very consistent set of data. They hook together very nicely. You'd expect kids who stay in school versus drop out to be more likely to get a bachelor's degree. You expect kids who are getting high grades in college to finish a bachelor's degree. All these little pieces academically fit well together. And when we go on and look at graduate degrees and a variety, it all just fits. The kids who are doing better move forward in conventional academic indicators. Why? Well, there's a lot of literature exploring why kids engaged in the arts may do better academically. And one is a whole set of works dealing with linking art and cognitive development. Doing art is solving problems. Doing art is stimulating. Doing art helps brain function in a variety of ways. It affects spatial reasoning and music and in visual art and so forth. And so there's a cognitive development side to the story. There's also a simple engagement and motivation side to the story, documented in many places in the literature. Kids get engaged in art in school, and it spills over. We've watched kids go from practically non-participating in 5th grade classrooms to very good, intensive, high-quality art programs in line with in parallel with those 5th grade experiences. They go back to their regular classrooms, and they're more engaged. And what seems to happen is the kids discover themselves, believe in themselves, believe in each other, in part through art, because they're caring about each other's work, and they don't care about each other's mathematics. Art's got some special qualities in that human domain. And then I've mentioned the visual and performing arts and cultural engagement. These kids are engaged in school. And it's, in my book, I have a chapter on sports, because you gotta ask the question, is it art? Could it be sports? And basketball has some good engagement type effects. It doesn't have academic effects. It helps keep kids in school. And the conclusion is that opportunities for passionate engagement in school, no matter what they are certainly good. But the kids who are in art are not the same ones who are gonna get engaged in basketball, by and large. Or the kids in basketball are not necessarily the ones who are gonna get highly engaged in art. So having opportunities for everybody that are diverse, I'm sure, is important. Differences in pro-social behaviors favoring students with arts-rich experience. This showed up early in my work with the NELS database in things like kids highly involved in the arts doing more volunteer community service, political participation, voting, joining clubs, and so forth. And this is consistent throughout the databases that this is true. For example, the percent of young adults, so this is by age 26, that did civic and or community volunteering when they reported at age 26. And the low arts, low SES kids, 10.4% of those young adults from that group reported doing community service. 24.6% of the high arts, low income kids at age 26 reported involvement in some sort of community service. You can see that's higher than the whole sample. And for the first time in these graphics, we show the high income kids at the right end of the graphic, where the low arts, high income kids, that's the fourth column from the left, they don't volunteer as much as the poor high arts kids, which is, again, it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty powerful thing going on, whatever causes it. And community volunteering in another database. We cross-checked the same patterns in different databases and found, in most cases, very similar things. We did other statistical methods to test these. We ran regressions, controlling for SES or family background. What's the effect of arts engagement on our outcomes, in this case, civic volunteering. And I won't go into the stats here. If you want to look at that contrast, I can explain it to you if you email me or catch me here. The basic idea is that the importance of arts engagement outpaces the importance of SES. The slope is steeper, which itself is interesting. And various participation in pastimes favor the high arts, low-income kids over the low arts, low-income kids. They read more books, they watch less television, they join academic honor societies with more frequency, they join student government and service clubs. Well, this is a profile of kind of an engaged, productive kid in high school. They work on yearbooks and newspapers, and they're more likely to participate in some extracurricular activity. 76% of the high arts kids were involved in some extracurricular activity in high school. Only half of the low arts counterparts were. Political participation, just the first couple of columns. This is the percent who voted in the 2004 national election. And so this 31% of the low arts, low SES kids voted, 45%. So you sort of get the picture, and this report provides these sorts of perspectives and additional ones that help support the arguments further. And why the arts and pro-social behavior? After writing the book and during the time working on this, I began giving a lot of thought to what's the pro-social behavior about? And I've concluded, I've written one paper about this, that one piece has got to be the community and collaborative nature of the arts experiences. So when you're in a band or you're in a dance company or a theater troupe or painting a mural with 12 kids, you're depending on each other. And when you succeed, you congratulate each other. And there's a social reinforcing aspect of arts participation that probably leads to more caring and probably leads to more caring and pro-social behavior later on. I think whoever's being held up back there as a dancer is very dependent on whoever it is behind her. Nice picture, by the way. And then another, and this is where my paper focuses, is when you look at the neuroscience of art experiences, viewing pictures, seeing faces, recognizing faces, listening to music, dancing with a helmet with 94 electrical contacts on your head, the aspects of those behaviors are accompanied by certain activity in the brain. And that activity is very much overlapping with the neural circuitry of having empathic reactions to experiences. And that's pretty interesting. I mean, it does map very closely. And so using the plasticity argument of how brains develop, if you develop circuits in your brain because you're doing something and those circuits overlap with something else, you may develop skills in that something else at the same time. I'm not going to belabor the details right here. And then on into adulthood, we did look at what these kids studied in college and the kinds of jobs they took. And this is lifted right from the report. We looked at the percentage of kids doing particular types of majors in college. We called them professional majors. I'll talk about the arts in just a sec, but you can see management and so forth. It's 6.8% for the high arts kids versus 3.8. Remember, these are low-income kids. Going into education, it's about 2 to 1. Nursing and allied health professions, it's about 3 to 1. Social sciences, 30% higher. Biological sciences, 3 to 1. And in the arts, it's 4 to 1. And Sunil came up to me yesterday and said, "Arts, are you sure that's a professional?" And I said, well, we probably can't sort that out because it's nice to see it in there just for whatever it means. And a lot of professionals out here in the audience and around this table who either majored in art or took a tremendous interest in art. And that's about as far as I'm going to go with that question. Then finally, at 26, the 12,000 NELS subjects were asked, what kind of work do you expect to be doing by age 30? This is the last panel of the survey, so you're not going to catch them at age 30. You better see what they expect. And these were the answers. Again, comparing the high arts low income to the low arts low income. Managerial, a bit higher for high arts. Sales, small for everybody, but again, the balance favors high arts kids. School teachers, 8.5% of the high arts subjects at age 26 expected to be teachers at age 30. That's probably because they were already teachers at age 26, so that's an easy call. And that is more than twice as many as the low arts kids. Professional artist or entertainer, more than 2 to 1. Lawyer, 2 to 1. Medical professional, 3 to 1. Other professional, 2 to 1. Physician, 9 to 1, but the numbers are small. And so, but what do you expect? We said back in 8th grade and 10th grade and 12th grade that these kids were advanced academically. We saw that they went on to four-year college programs in more frequency. They finished degrees in more frequency. They get on in graduate programs more frequently. This is exactly what you'd expect by age 26 for the kids we studied. And as I've said, there are a number of additional perspectives in here. I hope there are many of these available for audience members and certainly for the council, and it's certainly available online. And it was a pleasure doing it. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the colleagueship. Sunil and I were on the phone and email, I don't know, 80 times, perhaps over 8 months. So, I mean, it was good. There's a lot of collegial, and with Susan and with Jillian. It was a great collaborative project, and I'm proud of it, and hope you get a chance to see it and enjoy it. So.
Thank you very much, James. To defend my position more than anything else, let me assure you I know the arts are professionals.
Didn't yesterday.
What was that? No. So we're happy to take any questions from the council members.
Sunil, why do you think the arts is not a profession? No, just joking. So the next question, and maybe this may be more to the chairman, great information. How savvy can we be about getting this out in so many different ways?
Well, I think, you know, as I watch this, not only is this fascinating, not only is it compelling, but it highlights to me one of the very, very important roles that the NEA can play, which is far beyond our ability to make grants directly to artists and arts organizations. We're able to lead conversations. We're able to use our platform, our forum, to engage discussions that otherwise wouldn't have been had, and be able to shape those. And when you get someone who has the reputation that James has, and you can organize a body of thought and thinking around that, it has tremendous power and tremendous effect. And one of the reasons that we've ramped up our research department, we've tried to give Sunil more and more of the resources he requires, is because we think this kind of work and this kind of analysis has tremendous effect and tremendous impact over time, and you're going to be seeing much more of that from us as we go on. And this is very compelling work, fascinating to see.
Mr. Chairman, kind of an observation and a question. My observation goes to what Urban's saying, that the results are pretty consistent with the results we've seen in other studies, whether it seems to be for young people, now somewhat older young people, and even those in aging categories where the arts are very helpful and turn to things. It is frustrating to think that we can't get the word out as powerfully as we could. And now with the development with the Department of Education and closer workings there, it may be that into the curriculum development phase, we can get more of this in there to get STEM to STEAM, so to speak. So that's just an observation. The other is a question. You showed a diagram of a brain and tried to gloss over the neural aspects, and I guess only because I'm in the middle of reading a book about why the internet's hurting people. Talks about the physical aspects of the brain in this book, and how, and use military as an example, that if you have an amputee in the field, they know that the evidence is clear that the brain actually rewires itself to do things differently. And I would assume through sports, which I grew up as an athlete, you learn, what is it, muscle memory or whatever it's called, that your brain rewires to that. Do you see any literally scientific evidence of neural brains where kids have been tracked over a period of time to create muscle memory of the brain, that the arts are a positive thing?
The answer to that is certainly yes, and it appears in various places. It appears, for instance, and probably most extensively in research on music, in a couple of ways. But the music learning, learning to read music, string instrument playing is known to impact spatial reasoning skills, and it makes sense. And music's proportional, the notes are proportional. They involve some mathematics relationships and ideas of comparing space. The violin fingering is, in a way, it's proportional, but it's tricky because the intervals get shorter as you go up the neck. And you learn a lot about spatial reasoning, and that's been documented in active imaging of the brain while doing the performance, and looks at accomplished musicians who've been at it for a long time versus the brains of non-musicians, or getting some sort of control to compare, that the brains do develop differently. And I can't cite a specific study, so I'll just make one up. I'm sure there are studies that have followed young children starting violin lessons at age 7 or 8 and imaged them 4 years later and found development inside the same kids. So there is the rewiring of the brain because of experience is about universal. I mean, it's the brain through which we sense things, through which we perform, and when we sense things differently, and when we perform things better or differently, something has changed in the brain.
I would just add to that, Jim, that I think the thing that's really needed now is bringing some of those studies to scale. I mean, I think between us, we could probably think of a lot of those kinds of studies having been done in very small groups, these imaging studies, and actually think that the work that you just heard about with NICoE is going to be pivotal for that. I mean, bringing it to scale and looking at the brain imaging and understanding that relationship between whether it's writing in this case or ultimately music and those pathways, I think, is something we're really hoping to get out of that partnership. And we're looking for opportunities to do that elsewhere as well.
Let me add a very short anecdote. I accidentally bumped into one of the most senior neuroscientists at UCLA on an airplane. And we started chatting, and I just asked her a very simple question. What happens when a musical note hits an eardrum? And I ended up with a very detailed drawing, a schematic drawing of the brain. So where this travels and da-da-da-da-da-da. And then and I said, what happens when the same note hits the eardrum again, as little as a minute later? And she said, oh, that's all different. And the differences happen because you've experienced it, and you've done some evaluating, you've appraised it, you've stored it in certain kinds of memory, you've evaluated it, and you hear it again, and it brings back that first experience, and your brain treats it differently. And so, just that alone, as far as whether you'd call that rewiring or not, I'm not sure. Rewiring refers to the circuit paths that are active and most active when you experience something. So I'm not going to call it rewiring in that simple sense, but the brain does react to experience strongly.
I'll get to you in 1 second, Joan, but you and Irvin raise, I think, a critical question here. I've been interviewing candidates for the new director of our education discipline, with a view to the idea that the NEA needs to be at the inflection point between the research that we're seeing and an actual, some kind of real rollout of our arts education in the schools. It's much easier said than done, and Sunil's job, of course, is to do research, not to be an advocate. But it's something that James might be able to address much better than I can. But for instance, on April 30th, we're having a meeting here with the people who have been deeply involved in the A-plus schools that you know about, I'm sure, in Oklahoma, started in North Carolina, now in Arkansas, where they've had tremendous results with professional training for teachers in the arts, and not so much teaching art as in using arts-infused teaching techniques. We need to start finding some, because not everybody's talking to everybody else, and even if I brought in Arnie Duncan, brainwashed him with all of this, that's probably the wrong word, and I probably shouldn't be saying any of this in public session, but if we convince the entire Department of Education about the value of this, and they do realize the value of a lot of this, it would be, to some extent, a drop in the bucket in the whole education system, because the entire budget of the Department of Education is so small relative to what is spent on in every school in tens of thousands of school districts across the country. This is, to some extent, hand-to-hand combat with every superintendent of schools, every board of education, every school district, the states throughout the country. It is a big, big job. I think to some extent we can be a platform and a catalyst, but it is, and I think we should undertake it. I think we should do it, but it's a job that's much bigger than us and is going to take a while. I wonder if, James, if you could address it, or Sunil, both of you, about that question.
I agree with you. The image I'm having as you speak is the old post office building is the education system, and we're trying to change it, and we're outside of it in a way, sometimes inside, and I don't know, no people are in it, keep this healthy, but you're firing 22 bullets at it, and 22 caliber bullets at it, and by the time you've shot it 1,000 times, it looks exactly the same. It's got little holes here and there. And then the other way to refine that analogy is a little bit is some of us are shooting 22 bullets that have a real impact where they hit, and some of us are shooting with a child's ping pong ball gun, and it's just bouncing off and nothing's happening. So that, in a sense, that's the scale of the problem. But there's a lot of interest in integrating arts with academic subjects in one way or another, of working with teaching artists to help teachers understand art more and to do the same thing. It's been a response to cutbacks in straightforward arts education money to try to do a little end run around that issue to get more arts into schools. And at the same time, certainly the professions and parents and society a frustration with the lack of system response to an awful long list of things over decades makes it more and more likely that the art's going to get a real chance to step up to the plate.
I'm hopeful. It's a big job. Joan?
Yes. James, years ago, there was a lot of discussion about the Mozart Effect. Newborns and CDs were given to mothers and, studying and learning and all of that. And then there was information that said, nah, it doesn't work. And so we haven't heard anything about that recently. So in light of all your work, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. I'm very thankful that that study came up because I heard it driving on an LA freeway on my car radio. And it was very popularized before it ever made a dent in academic circles and turned a lot of heads. What's going on? It turned my head what was going on, and in a sense was part of a building desire I had to check art and developmental issues out as a researcher. Yeah, just summarize what it is. Fran Rauscher and colleagues at UC Irvine tested college students. They played music for them, and it was actually a piano sonata, Mozart, a specific one, K444, I think. And then pretty immediately afterwards gave the subjects spatial reasoning tests. And they compared the ones who listened to Mozart to students given computer training, to students just listening to white noise, and so forth. And there was a little kick in spatial, that was statistically significant, in spatial reasoning skill growth among the ones who listened to Mozart. They tried other symphonies, they tried other composers. Nothing ever showed up. They come back to this particular piano sonata, and it has this effect. And so, I mean, that's more or less the way the research went. They checked longer-term effects. A week later, no effect. Okay, and that's, so Mozart sputters out, but interest in music and the brain starts to take off. And politically, the governor of Georgia is delivering a CD at the door of every birthing room in the state, and entire companies are born to provide music for your kid, prenatal, postnatal, headphones on the whatever, and it was a whole industry. But it got people thinking about what are these connections, because the next studies to be done started finding things that stood up and stood up for longer. So in a sense, it was a landmark for that reason. But I wouldn't go out and buy Mozart CDs unless you want to listen to them, and they're really worth it for that purpose, I think.
The other thing I would add would be history has shown time and time again that even the most brilliant technology companies who come up with the first bits of research sometimes aren't the companies that last. Sometimes they go right out of business, but it's the companies that really effectively get the message out. And what I think we've seen, even in hostile environments, companies that survive are the ones that kind of do the slow-paced, steady walk despite the environment. So I think the opportunity for us here at the NEA is to figure out what is the clear, concise, sticky message that we want to get out about this, and this research kind of consistently reinforces what we're trying to get folks to know. Sort of kind of like the target bullseye. You don't even need target anymore, you just need the bullseye, and people know that you get more for less kind of a thing. And if we could do that, not to downgrade us to a point of Target's a great company or whatever, but we're the arts. If we could do something like that, that's what I think, I'm hoping all this research can lead us to a point where we can come up with one sticky kind of thing that people, a message that people really get, that they're passionate about, that they feel in their hearts, to know that, what we do is all these things that we've been saying.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Thanks, James. I'd like to now ask... Great. I would now like to ask my Chief of Staff and Director of Public Affairs, Jamie Bennett, to come up and give us a brief update on how we're using websites, social media, and the NEA magazine to reach out to even more Americans. Jamie.
Great. Thanks, Rocco. I'll also just add at the top that as we were listening to that presentation, the Rhode Island Arts Council actually just put out a press release about the Catterall report. So there's already a press release from the State Arts Council of Rhode Island saluting the research and drawing attention to it. So well done. I just wanted to briefly highlight some of the work of our Office of Public Affairs and specifically talk about our website, arts.gov, which is in fact the face of the NEA to the vast majority of Americans. Traditionally, there's one way that the public can really interact with a funding agency like the NEA, which is to ask us for money and then either get it or not. And what we've really tried to do over the past 3 years is to use the website, to use social media, to use other outreach that we're doing to give people new ways to interact with the agency, to invite in new voices, to join in new conversations, and to really make the NEA a site that people want to come to engage in something exciting. I'll run through a couple ways that we've done that quickly and then focus on one. A lot of the work is through the 3 blogs that we run. Big Read blog, which supports the Big Read grant program. The Blue Star Museum blog, which we have going just in the summer. And while it's up in the summer, it's actually the second most hits of anything on our website, second only to information about getting grants. And then, of course, the Artworks blog, which is the agency's general blog. We've also launched a Twitter account, and I'm pleased to say that we have over 15,000 people following at NEA Arts, as well as a Facebook page where we have 12,000 likes. And I should add that some of my colleagues are very busy getting ready for the turnover this weekend to the new Facebook timeline and milestone. So if you check back to our Facebook page on Monday, you'll see a new look for that. As a lot of you hopefully know, we have a weekly podcast series that we produce, and as of St. Patrick's Day, we actually produced 100 original interviews with artists, curators, administrators, and other creative thinkers, all of which are available for free on iTunes U as well as through arts.gov. But for today, I wanted to focus for a minute on NEA Arts, which is our agency's magazine. You can find archived copies on the website going back to 2004, but I actually want to focus on the magazine since 2009, when 2 of our colleagues at the NEA, primarily Don Ball and Paulette Beat, were allowed to reconceive the look and mission of the magazine. This is as it was before, and then in 2009, this is the look and feel that we moved to. The last 3 issues, the top row of magazine covers you see, have focused on festivals, which was actually an issue that was inspired by NEA research, the first research we're aware of that looked into festivals in a holistic way. Second one looked at creative placemaking in rural America, and one of the stories features Ajo, Arizona, which Rocco just mentioned visiting. And then the third issue is focused on up-and-comers, and it focused on younger artists, including Esperanza Spalding. There's a great story with her that was designed specifically to help our discipline directors and our program staff reach out to potential new applicants. So we often hear as an agency that there's a misconception that the NEA exists only to fund long-established or well-known institutions and entities, and that if you're new, there's no room for you at the NEA. That couldn't be further from the truth, and we really wanted to underscore that point, which we did with that issue. We also drove that point home even further with our current issue of NEA Arts, which focuses on innovation. This issue in particular is notable for a number of reasons, including that this is the first issue of NEA Arts that actually has no bylines. And the reason it has no bylines is it's the first issue that's entirely told in the first-person voice of artists. So this issue is actually 100% artist words spoken by artists to us. The issue was used by Senior Deputy Chair Joan Shigakawa and Deputy Chair Patrice Powell as a jumping-off point for a series of conversations with NEA staff about emerging directions in the arts, new art forms, and specifically the NEA's role in helping move forward innovation in both emerging art forms as well as the ones that are sort of most traditional. I'm also pleased to report anecdotally that Bob Frankel recently told us that the Alliance of Artist Communities is using this issue as one of 2 pieces of required reading for a retreat they're holding on the future of artist communities. So I think it's getting out there and a helpful resource to the field. The issue is absolutely available in hard copy, and so people like to hold something in their hands while reading will always have this. But I want to focus for a minute on the content that's only on our website. We do a number of web-only features to accompany each issue. And I wanted to show a brief highlight. This is about 2.5 minutes that we put together that focuses on 4 media pieces that we did that are on the website to accompany the innovation issue. We'll take a quick look at Meredith Monk, Lo Anthem, Mei Jun Yoon, and Tony Arico. So I'm going to let this play.
Innovation has a lot to do with not being afraid to find your own way of doing something and not having something that you know before you start working on it, but literally really trying to find something. And the moments of discovery are what really keep me going in my life. I try to start from zero in every piece with no assumptions. And so then it's a matter of working through my fear and anxiety. When you find what your question is, then the curiosity sort of overtakes the fear, and then you're basically on the path of that world that you're trying to listen to.
To me, art via music always just made me feel free, like there are no rules. Maybe artists before me have written down certain rules, but the whole framework of it is do what you want, try something new, and make your own rules, and that freedom I was always attracted to. On my way home,
Light Drift, we did in Philadelphia for the Schuylkill River, and we wanted the people to have a direct connection to the water. So what we did was we created an installation that had about 20 seats and about 80 floating pods, and the seats are pod-like themselves. And what happens is when people walk by, they actually flicker and entice people to sit on them. And when you sit on them, you actually control or change the lighting in the river. So essentially you can, with several other people, play a kind of urban scale game and transform the lights, etc. And they flickered from green to blue.
I feel this incredible joy and this high after I'm done. It's like getting dirty in the backyard. I'm full of graphite and sweat and I'm tired. Let's go back to childhood, large amounts of time alone in a room, looking into a mirror or listening to that same piece of music or sitting in the dark or sitting in the light, just experiencing self and time. I'm really attracted to the moments, the breakthrough moments of doing something for a long period of time.
I love the sound of that drawing. That video is one of my favorites, and I think you can all see why. I wanted to end just with a quick sneak peek at the next issue of NEA Arts, which is due out in the middle of April. We're calling it sort of internally, Where Are They Now? And it's a look at the journeys of past NEA grantees. And so you'll be able to read articles about Nikki Giovanni, the Lowell, Massachusetts National Historical Park, Steppenwolf Theater, the Mississippi Arts Commission, and Mark Morris, all of which received early support from the NEA. And then also because most of the time the public affairs staff spends their time getting credit to the agency as it's due, I just wanted to take a quick moment, if you'll indulge me, to give credit to the staff of public affairs, all of whom are involved in putting this together. So I just want to take a moment to publicly thank Carlos Ariane, Liz Auclair, Don Ball, Paulette Beat, Ann Waller-Curtis, Sally Gifford, Rebecca Gross, Jackie Harmon, Victoria Hutter, Adam Campy, David Lowe, Joe Reed, and Kelly Rogowski. That's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Joan?
Jamie, how you manage being chief of staff, public affairs, communications is mind-boggling. And I just want to say that in the last couple years, you have used every conceivable method to get the word out, except for carrier pigeon, I think. And I just want to congratulate. It's just phenomenal, the work that you've done here, and thank you and your staff for that.
Thank you. I mean, the truth of it is I've had almost nothing to do with anything I just presented. My job is to mostly stay out of the way of the people whose names I just said, so all of that's directed out there.
This is the usual misdirection from Jamie. Jamie has 2 full-time jobs here at the NEA, and by the way, he has completely reinvigorated, reshaped, reformed, really, our communications department. It's nothing like what it was. It is a powerful machine now. And whenever I compliment Jamie on something that he's done there, he'll say, "Oh, that's Don Ball. That's Victoria. That's Sally. That's he always deflects it to someone else. Well, something must be going right over there, and someone must be in charge of it."
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. My final piece of business is to announce that the National Council on the Arts has reviewed the applications and guidelines presented to them, and a tally of the council members' ballots reveal that all recommendations for funding and rejections have passed. Are there any additional comments, questions, or discussions from the council members? You guys have been very engaged this morning. It's good. Anything else? Okay. I would like to thank the entire NEA staff for all of the hard work and dedication that went into preparing for the past day and a half of council meetings and for everything they do. I'm incredibly proud to lead this agency and incredibly lucky to know this group of dedicated public servants. The 175th meeting of the National Council on the Arts is now adjourned. See you all in June.